You know, it really does not make sense how the Security Council has 5 members who just stay there. They're always on the panel, and they can make the decisions.
That these 5 powers of such declarative power in the Security Council just doesn't make too much sense to me. I mean,
if one were to consider the role of the United Nations and its branches, he or she would expect to have a clear, more or less concise idea as to their roles and responsibilities. He could visit the website, read the different pages that it has to offer, and be able to explain to others the importance, the righteousness, and the flawless function of the UN's branches. Reality check. The United Nations is not the beacon of international hope it is made out to be. Within the UN resides the Security Council. Chapter 5, Article 24A of the United Nations Charter states that the Security Council's primary responsibility is the maintenance of international peace and security. The Security Council performs 3 main functions: handing down sanctions, establishing and maintaining peacekeeping operations, and authorizing military action. Established mandates under any of these 3 functions are called resolutions. The Security Council consists of 15 members, 4 states, 10 of which are voted in by the General Assembly. The other 5 states are permanent members: the United States, China, Russia, Great Britain, and France. It is certainly powerful to have a say in every majority international mandate for all time, but it is more powerful to have the ability to deny a resolution from coming to pass. In Article 27-3, the Security Council Charter states, "Decisions of the Security Council on all other matters shall be made by an affirmative vote of 9 members, including the concurring votes of the permanent members." The last phrase, "including the concurring votes of the permanent members," has and continues to be the Security Council's greatest weakness. Any resolution, whether it be as obvious as establishing the ocean blue, can be vetoed by a permanent member state. When violation complaints come to the United Nations, committees examine the complaints and their situations. When it is determined that indeed violations are occurring, the Security Council will then decide whether or not to take action. The Security Council can perform any of its main functions in order to halt the continuation of such human rights violations. In accordance with procedures, a vote will occur to pass a resolution regarding the violation among the 15 members. But what if there is a conflict of interest from a voting state? Normally, conflicts of interest could easily be amended by a majority rule vote. The issue occurs, however, when this conflicted member nation is one of the 5 permanent members and therefore has the power to veto the resolution. Since 1946, there have been 263 vetoes to either entire or various parts of Security Council resolutions. There are many reasons why a resolution could be vetoed. Great Britain has used its veto power 31 times, usually in conjunction with the 17 veto of France, since 1956. As for the other 3 permanent members of the Security Council, their vetoes are of particular interest in terms of human rights violations. The Russian Federation takes the lead with 127 vetoes, 93 of which were in complete opposition of the proposed resolution, and 29 of which were in opposition of specific paragraphs or segments of the proposed resolution. During the Cold War, the USSR used 119 vetoes. USSR Foreign Minister Andrei Gromyko was known as Mr. Niet, or Mr. No. In 1968, one of these vetoes made headlines. In late 1968, 500,000 Soviet and Warsaw Pact troops invaded Czechoslovakia in response to the rising liberalization movement. This Prague Spring was silenced after 500 Czechs were killed in the invasion, and most Czech leaders and politicians were arrested and flown for interrogation in Moscow. Justified through the breakage of Articles 5, 19, and 9 of the Universal Declaration of Human Rights, the USSR's invasion and total takeover of affairs was a complete violation of human rights. These violations did not go unnoticed, for in October of 1968, mere months after the occurrence, Canada submitted a resolution draft directly addressing the situation. The US, Brazil, Denmark, France, Paraguay, and other countries all jointly sponsored the draft. In essence, the resolution would send a UN representative to Prague with the task of ascertaining information regarding the safety and whereabouts of imprisoned Czech politicians. The representative from the Soviet Union objected, stating that doing so would infringe on the sovereign affairs of Czechoslovakia and after great debate, the resolution was vetoed by the USSR. With this veto power, the Soviets were able to completely disregard a humanitarian effort, an effort that was not even to free imprisoned citizens, but to simply know the health, safety, and whereabouts of political prisoners through the UN observation. I asked students of Lafayette College their take on human rights, the Security Council's role with human rights, and the cases in which the veto power has made Security Council incompetent in handling violations. So, Maddie, you know, obviously this Security Council within the United Nations, you have these 15 members, 10 of which are rotating, obviously, and the 5 permanents. During the Cold War era, you have over 163 vetoes between the USSR and the US. What would you say in regards to human rights? Would you say that during that period they regressed? Did they progress? There are some historians who said that they regressed due to the number of vetoes. Would you agree with that statement?
Yes, I would agree. I don't think that it's very right that just those 5 countries with their own interests are able to affect human rights that strongly, because it's very apparent that their own interests are the bottom line, despite any human right justification they might give for whatever reason. I think that at the end of the day, greed kind of is stronger than human rights, and just in my personal.
Absolutely.
Another case to examine is that of the United States and its stark stance against Palestinian recognition on an international level. The United States, although intertwined with the history of failed attempts to mend relations between Arabs and Israelis, has used its veto power 41 times in an effort to block Palestinian statehood and recognition. The issue is the unimaginably deep political alliance between the U.S. and Israel. The alliance is blindly upheld even after the Israeli government has and continues to violate international human rights laws. Israel's most obvious human rights violation against Palestinians is its incessant establishment of Israeli settlements on Palestinian designated land. In conjunction with these Israeli settlements comes uninhibited violence against local Palestinians. The UN General Assembly, along with the International Court of Justice, has condemned the settlements. Yet even with such condemnations and rulings, Israel has done nothing to disestablish these settlements. Human rights violations occur on a daily basis in the surrounding areas. Palestinians are restricted access to certain lands in areas such as the West Bank, where Israelis control around 40% of the land as a result of these settlements. According to Resolution 58/592, adopted by the General Assembly, the West Bank is military-occupied territory since the Six-Day War of 1967. More specifically, that the Palestinian people have the right to self-determination and to sovereignty over their territory, and that Israel, the occupying power, has only the duties and obligations of an occupying power under the Geneva Convention relative to the protection of civilian persons in time of war. By continually breaking Articles 15 and 13 of the Universal Declaration of Human Rights, Israel is screaming to the international community that it does not care about General Assembly resolution. Yet although Israel is the perpetrator, it is the United States that has the history of and continuation to veto and threaten the use of veto regarding Palestinian matters. As Israel continues to break human rights laws, the United States protects it from sanctions with vetoes that are justified by the hope of resumed peace negotiations. The list of vetoed resolutions is incredible. One of the unbelievable vetoed resolutions was number 446. It read that the UN determined that Israeli settlements were a serious obstruction to peace and called on Israel to abide by the Fourth Geneva Convention. By vetoing this resolution, the U.S. made it clear that Israel did, and does not today, have to follow the provisions set out by the Fourth Geneva Convention. So Tom, what is your take on human rights? Do you think they've moved forward? In past years you have all these vetoes going on in the Security Council. Do you think human rights are still important today?
Well, considering that I think human rights are a set of incontrovertible privileges that are basically inherent to man, and they are increasing. They are still very pertinent to society and world. And even though these vetoes keep occurring, that the issue is still very important, that human rights need to be maintained.
Settlements within the Gaza Strip, within the West Bank, that they're wrong, that they are violations of human rights, and that they need to stop. Do you think, ethically, do you think that these things are morally correct? Do you think that, this Security Council, the ability for the U.S. to bring up these vetoes and completely deny these resolutions from coming out, do you think that, that's correct? Is that morally, ethically correct?
Because of the nature of these issues and the fact that the U.S. has such an incredible influence in Israel, that these vetoes they don't seem to be taking into account the benefit of the citizens that are being involved. They seem to be only taking account into the benefit that the U.S. will serve to get from these decisions, and that Israel will serve because they're just trying to preserve their relation and preserve any and all benefits that can be directed towards them. So morally, I don't think it is. I don't think it upholds morally, because they're taking the rights of humans and making them subservient to the interests of the state.
A third and final megapower in the Security Council that requires examination is the People's Republic of China. Although it has used its veto power far fewer times than the previously mentioned nations, China's vetoes have been for very domestically driven reasons. In 2007, for example, China used its veto power in the case of Darfur, the area in Sudan where countless lives have been taken due to cultural differences and civil war. When the issue was brought before the United Nations for discussion and sanctioning, China showed where it stood on the issue by vetoing a sanction-based resolution for Sudan. Liu Zhenmin, Chinese representative to the Security Council, justified the veto according to Chinese values on national sovereignty. In terms of Sudan, according to Chinese belief, the African Union is the next highest power that stands as the judicator in deciding Sudan's sanctions. Zhenmin made it clear when he said, "One important reason for our vetoing is the political mutual trust and positive interaction of all parties. The tripartite mechanism of the United Nations, the African Union, and the Sudanese government is operating smoothly, and that is a key factor in ensuring progress in deployment." Without doubt, these words would be a great justifier and strong reason for such a veto, had they not been shadowed by China's recent energy resource activities in Africa, particularly in Sudan. In the past 2 decades, China's economy has been growing at a 9% annual rate. With such growth comes the incredible need for energy resources. Although Africa holds a fraction of the world's resources compared to the Middle East, China's biggest suppliers in Africa as of 2006 were Angola, the Republic of Congo, Equatorial Guinea, and Sudan. With the need for oil from these nations, including Sudan, China took the only serious action it could in order to protect such assets, a vetoing of resolutions that would normally sanction the Sudanese government. One reporter wrote, China had in the past sold its UN veto power to protect Sudan from sanctions over the killing of people in Darfur in exchange for access to Sudanese oil. China is now Sudan's biggest customer. In the eyes of the Chinese, barrels of oil and domestic economic growth were more important than the thousands of lives being taken under the rule of an idle Sudanese government. So Eric, what's your definition of human rights? What do you think they are today? Do you think they're important today? And I guess based on your major, what are economic rights? Are there any economic rights?
Well, basic human rights, I guess, would be the rights that we have that cannot be taken away. For an example, John Locke said life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness are unalienable rights that we have as individuals and as humans. And I think that really applies, especially to economics. And the way that it applies to economics, I think, is in business, maybe when a business is trying to do everything it can, maybe to make a profit or make some money, it is usually, an infringement on a person's human rights. I think that's a huge problem.
So would you say China's vetoing of the resolution within the Security Council, vetoing that resolution that would have sent in observers, possible peacekeepers, do you think their vetoing of that was legal? Or do you think that was
think it's a conflict of interest, which is something that I think that the Security Council needs to take under advisement and kind of look at, because if China has these economic interests in the Sudan, I don't think that they can accurately or really make a decision about the Sudan if they're just trying to protect their own. I think that if they're looking at it more from an economic perspective and kind of trying to protect themselves instead of the human rights of the people in the Sudan, then I think that that's a huge issue and that needs to be taken care of.
In the cases of Russian, U.S., and Chinese resolution vetoes, it should be recognized that the Security Council in its current permanent member system is a hindrance to human rights. It is the Security Council's role to take actions against perpetrating states. With the current system, any human rights violation that goes against or for a permanent member's political or economic policy will go unresolved. Unless changed, the Security Council, and by extension, the United Nations as a whole, is hopelessly outmatched by the Permanent Five's wants and needs.